If you've ever wondered what you need to know about Mark Twain, you're going to learn that right now. You're going to learn 5 things that you need to know about Mark Twain, and we're going to do it at his house. We're at Sam Clemens' house, Samuel Langhorne Clemens. You know him as Mark Twain. Mark Twain is one of Hartford's heroes. He's a writer, satirist, all-around well-known character, and he lived here in Hartford for several decades of his life. So what's funny about Mark Twain is you probably know him for many of the quotes that you just take for granted. Like one of the most famous quotes that's attributed to Mark Twain is, "Better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." Something that you hear often where people say maybe, and the idea being maybe you ought to just keep it to yourself if you don't know it to be true. One of the ones that my kids love to say is, it's always important to obey your parents as long as they're present. And if they're not, what he's basically saying is giving you permission to do whatever you want. His writings, his quips, his witticism are just well renowned because he really set the stage for being kind of an anti-authority figure in a time when there weren't many of those. Even though he's known as a writer, Mark Twain was really like an early Renaissance man, invented a number of things, including like a self-sticking scrapbook and a number of things that we just take for granted in our modern culture. But he was definitely one of those sort of early pioneers in coming up with new and different ways to do things. Kind of just a true thinker, traditional thinker and innovator. That's part of what he did. Mark Twain was also a consummate traveler. He spent the latter half of his life living in both in New York, Hartford, and Bermuda. He also traveled mostly around the entire world. There's really not many places he didn't go because he was just such an avid consumer and devourer of information and experience. He talked about early in his life how staying in one place would be the death of him, and he didn't want to ever be grounded or rooted anywhere, probably which came as a result of his experience growing up on the Mississippi River and seeing people, and then early in his life becoming a steamboat captain. So he definitely took that vagabond travel experience to the next level, and even right up until he died, where he died when he was in Bermuda, or his last trip to Bermuda was in the last year of his life. He never stopped traveling, he never stopped moving. He did live 74 years, so he had a 74-year life, and he absolutely packed it with stuff. So Mark Twain, known for writing Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, was really more of like the original vagabond rabble-rouser, maybe even the very first American content creator, because he basically was born in Missouri, poor family, like a lot of families, had to quit school at 11, got super committed to his first job, which he worked in like a local printing press. And that was where he started to read and consume as much information as he could about the world around him. And as soon as he started to learn about the world around him, he decided he wanted to go see everything. And so he became a consummate, devoured everything he could and got on as many boats and planes and trains as he possibly could to see the world. And in fact, by the time he was about 20, he became a steamship captain. Basically just like probably the kind of guy that we would know and be like, man, that guy just doesn't seem to settle down. He's got no roots. He's just roaming the wild wilderness of the American landscape. Eventually became a Confederate soldier, fought in the Civil War, and which is ironic considering that The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was basically considered one of the very first testimonies to the horrors and tragedy of racism. Despite the controversy around that book, it was definitely intended to be a testimony to how terrible that was in this country. Like a lot of famous people, they hang out with other famous people, and Mark Twain was actually notoriously good friends with Nikola Tesla. And no relation obviously to Elon Musk, but Mark Twain and Nikola Tesla hung out all the time, which it isn't actually surprising because they were both very cutting edge, on the edge of what was happening in their era and in their time. While Tesla was working on creating new forms of energy and trying to figure out how to break ground in that space, Mark Twain was really on the cutting edge of creating thought processes and how to think and he's commonly been referred to as the first American satirist because much of what he's said and done is now in American lore.